He saved the princess with his own body, and the queen will not free him. Below him, the planet's surface shimmered like polished emerald, forests stretching farther than the eye could see, rivers like silver threads cutting through valleys. Most pilots spent their days mapping the planet's resources, monitoring alien activity, or transporting goods. Kale's job, simple as it was, usually involved little excitement, until today. He noticed it first as a flicker on the scanner, a ripple of energy that didn't match any normal pattern. Then he saw the flashes on the planet's surface, bright and sudden, moving too fast for normal traffic. It was a disturbance near the royal convoy. His heart tightened. The princess was on that convoy. Without hesitation, Kale pushed the throttle forward. His shuttle leapt through the atmosphere, shaking as turbulence tore against the craft. Kale's mind raced. He had no official orders to intervene. He wasn't even trained for combat. But the princess's life was in danger, and Kale had never been the kind to stand by. Humans had a tendency to act when it mattered, even if the odds were against them. The convoy appeared below him, sleek transport vehicles designed to move quickly through the forests, escorted by armored drones. But something was wrong. The vehicles were under attack. Strange metallic creatures, half machine, half organic, emerged from the tree line, wielding energy weapons that glowed blue against the green of the forest. Kale felt a pang of fear, but it did not stop him. Fear, he had learned, was the spark of awareness. Action came from awareness. He guided his shuttle lower, weaving between trees, and positioned himself above the convoy. "Princess Lyra," he shouted into the comm system, hoping the royal signal was still active. "Stay inside your vehicle." There was a pause, then the faintest sound of her voice. "Kale, is that you? Hold on," he yelled. The attackers raised their weapons, aiming at the convoy. Kale realized quickly that the shields around the vehicles were insufficient. If the blast hit them directly, the transports would be destroyed. He had to act fast. Without thinking twice, Kale maneuvered his shuttle directly into the line of fire. Energy beams slammed against his shields. Sparks flew. The shuttle's hull groaned. He ignored the pain shooting through his arms from the feedback in the controls. With every ounce of skill he possessed, Kale moved the shuttle between the attackers and the convoy, absorbing their fire. One beam struck the cockpit directly. He felt a heat like fire crawling along his chest. The comm system flickered. He could see the princess inside her vehicle, her eyes wide with terror. Kale clenched his teeth and pushed forward, using the shuttle itself as a shield. The attackers hesitated. No one had ever put themselves in harm's way like this. Kale's audacity confused them. He had no superior firepower. He had no fleet. He had only his shuttle and his body, but humans were unpredictable. Kale was living proof of that. Another beam came, and Kale felt it graze his arm. Pain exploded through him, but he gritted his teeth and adjusted the shields to compensate. Sweat ran down his forehead. He had to save the princess. He would not fail. Finally, after what felt like an eternity but was only a few minutes, Kale saw an opening. One of the attackers miscalculated, leaving a gap in their formation. Kale dove the shuttle through it, creating a shielded corridor for the convoy. The vehicles accelerated, racing toward safety. Kale followed closely, his shuttle taking the brunt of every attack. Then came the last beam, brighter and more concentrated than the others. Kale realized instantly that it could pierce his shields entirely. He had seconds to react. Without hesitation, he positioned his body between the beam and the convoy. The energy hit him directly. Pain unlike anything he had ever known ripped through his body. He screamed but did not falter. His body absorbed the blast, shielding the princess and the convoy. The attackers faltered, confused by the humans' reckless courage. They retreated into the forest, leaving behind only smoke and scorched earth. Kale's shuttle was damaged beyond repair. Systems flickered and failed, leaving him barely conscious. He slumped over the controls, sweat and blood mixing, vision blurring. But he had done it. The princess was safe. Moments later, the royal convoy reached a safe zone where palace guards and medics rushed to the vehicles. Princess Lyra jumped out, her eyes wide and filled with tears. She ran toward Kale's shuttle. "Kale, are you alive?" she cried. He managed a weak nod, barely able to lift his hand. His body ached as if every bone had been shattered. Medics arrived, dragging him from the shuttle, stabilizing him with emergency nanobots that closed burns and reinforced his organs. His vision cleared enough to see the princess kneeling beside him, holding his hand. "You saved me," she whispered. You risked everything." Kale smiled faintly, too weak to speak. Humans, he thought, sometimes had to act without thinking. Courage was not about the absence of fear. It was about moving forward despite it. And today, that courage had kept a princess alive. But the moment of relief was short-lived. The royal hovercar carrying Kale and the princess returned to the citadel. The gleaming towers of the human-alien kingdom rose above them, silver and gold in the evening light. The queen awaited. Princess Lyra stepped forward, still holding Kale's hand. "Mother, he saved me, The queen cut her off with a wave of her hand, her face as cold and hard as steel. "Enough, Lyra. You do not understand the complexities of the throne. This man, this hero, cannot be allowed freedom." Kale blinked, struggling to comprehend. "But I saved her," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Yes," the queen said, voice echoing in the grand hall, "and that is precisely why you are dangerous. The people will idolize you. They will see you as more than just a servant, more than a soldier. They will see you as a symbol, and symbols can challenge kings and queens." The princess's eyes widened. "Mother, he risked his life. He deserves freedom." The queen shook her head. "Lyra, you are naive. He is safe here under my watch until we decide what to do." Kale's chest tightened. Even in pain, even after all he had endured, his mind began to race. Humans, he thought, had a way of surviving impossible situations. They adapted, they endured, they found ways to fight back. He was not defeated yet. He was taken to a high-tech chamber in the citadel, designed for observation and containment. Monitors lined the walls, tracking every heartbeat, every movement. The chamber was secure, but Kale noticed immediately that it had weaknesses. Small vents, maintenance access points, and interfaces that he could manipulate if he had enough time. The princess visited him often. She brought news, small gifts, and most importantly, hope. "I will not let them keep you forever," she said one day, holding his hand. "You saved me. Humanity, you are humanity at its best." Kale smiled faintly. "I did what any human would do," he whispered. "Sometimes being human means risking everything for another." Days passed, weeks even. Kale recovered physically, though his body bore the marks of his sacrifice. His shuttle had been destroyed, but his mind remained sharp. He began to study the chamber, observing the patterns of the guards, the weaknesses in the containment systems, and the ways he might communicate beyond the walls. The queen visited once, her presence intimidating. "Kale," she said, voice cold, "you are under my control. Any attempt to escape will be met with immediate consequences. Understand?" "I understand," Kale replied calmly. Inside, however, a plan began to form. Humans were never powerless. They could endure, think, adapt, and eventually overcome. The queen may have held his body, but his mind was free. His courage and his human ingenuity had saved a princess once, and it would do so again if necessary. At night, Kale stared out the chamber's reinforced window. Beyond it, the stars stretched infinitely. Somewhere out there, humans were charting, exploring, and surviving against impossible odds. He was one of them. He would endure. He would act. And one day he would be free again. For now, though, he rested, recovering, learning, and waiting. Every human has a spark, a piece of courage that no wall or queen can take away. Kale's spark burned brightly, ready to ignite the actions that would define the next chapter. And deep inside the citadel, the princess whispered his name, holding on to the hope that humanity and Kale would triumph, no matter the obstacles. Kale had spent nearly a week in the queen's high-tech chamber, confined but far from defeated. His body was healing from the energy blast that had nearly killed him, yet his mind was sharper than ever. Every human instinct he possessed whispered one truth: survival was never just about strength. It was about intelligence, adaptability, and courage. The chamber was sophisticated, designed to hold prisoners safely and securely. Sensors lined the walls, monitoring vital signs, movement, and even thought patterns through neural interfaces. The queen had spared no expense. To her, Kale was dangerous, not because he could physically escape, but because he had already become a symbol of human courage. Kale studied the chamber carefully. Every vent, every maintenance access panel, every digital interface was a potential tool. The Queen's guards were disciplined, predictable, and overly confident. Humans had a way of exploiting patterns, of thinking beyond the obvious. Kale intended to do exactly that. Princess Lyra visited daily. She had insisted on it, despite the Queen's objections. Kale noticed the subtle ways she carried news from the outside world, whispered rumors from palace staff, minor adjustments in the supply of meals, even small gifts that hinted at secret communication. Humans had always found ways to connect, even in impossible situations. "Kale," she whispered one evening, placing her hand on the reinforced glass, "they are afraid of you because you remind them what humans can do. Your courage, it inspires hope. You've already changed things here without leaving this room." Kale nodded weakly, grateful for her presence. "Humans are hard to contain," he said, "not because of weapons but because of their minds. Every system has a weakness. Every wall has a way through. You just have to find it." Lyra's eyes widened. "Do you mean escape?" Kale smiled faintly. "Eventually. But for now we learn, we observe, we wait for the right moment. Humans survive by thinking ahead, not by charging blindly." Days passed. Kale used the chamber's monitors and hidden access points to study the patterns of the guards. He noticed that the automated patrols were predictable, that some sensors could be tricked by small reflective surfaces, and that the maintenance ports were rarely checked. Each observation became a mental map, a plan forming quietly in the back of his mind. Meanwhile, the palace staff had begun noticing subtle disruptions. Food deliveries were slightly altered, messages moved more efficiently, and some minor systems seemed to behave differently. None of it was overt, but for those who paid attention, it was clear that someone inside was quietly making changes. The staff began to whisper among themselves about the hero in the chamber. Kale also experimented with communication beyond the walls. Using small tools hidden in his bandages and minor manipulations of the chamber's interfaces, he created tiny digital signals, coded flashes in the lights, brief pulses through the ventilation system. Lyra, observing these, learned to interpret them. Together, they developed a rudimentary system to exchange messages. "Kale, the Queen is planning a council tomorrow," Lyra whispered through their secret code. "She will announce stricter measures and she may try to discredit you publicly." Kale nodded. "Then we prepare. Humans are clever. We fight with our minds before we fight with our bodies." The council arrived. Human and alien dignitaries filled the chamber's viewing area, all watching Kale through reinforced glass. The Queen stood before them, poised and commanding, her voice echoing throughout the hall. "This man," she said, gesturing toward Kale, "acted recklessly. Though his actions saved my daughter, they were unauthorized and dangerous. We cannot allow such individuals to roam freely. His freedom must remain restricted." A murmur ran through the crowd. Humans were not accustomed to seeing one of their own praised while simultaneously condemned. Kale noticed the reactions, the pride, the admiration, the quiet anger. Every human in the room recognized the courage it took to act without hesitation, even against impossible odds. He raised his hand slightly, just enough for the guards to notice movement. A tiny signal, almost imperceptible. Lyra, watching from the side, understood instantly. The plan was moving forward. Over the next few days, Kale and Lyra communicated more, refining their system. Kale learned about the palace's weak points, the timing of guard shifts, the delays in sensor recalibrations, the small maintenance passages that allowed discreet movement. Each piece of information became a tool for the future. One evening, Lyra brought Kale a small device hidden inside a book. "This will help you interact with the chamber's systems," she said. "But be careful. If the Queen discovers it, they will increase your confinement." Kale examined the device. Tiny, almost unassuming, yet capable of sending signals to the chamber's interfaces. It was perfect. "Humans survive," he said, testing it, "because they find solutions where none seem to exist." Using the device, Kale began subtle manipulations. He adjusted environmental controls slightly, sending pulses that caused minor distractions among the guards. He redirected maintenance bots to move along paths that would assist later. Every adjustment was small, imperceptible to anyone without careful observation, but it was a human way of reclaiming control. The Queen noticed the changes almost immediately. "What is happening in that chamber?" she demanded one morning, her voice sharp with irritation. Guards searched, sensors recalibrated, yet Kale's subtle interventions evaded detection. Lyra, standing nearby, did not flinch. "Perhaps humans are clever," she suggested. "They have ways of adapting that even you cannot control." The Queen's glare silenced her, but Kale could sense the frustration. Even for someone as powerful as the Queen, controlling the human spirit was never simple. Meanwhile, word of Kale's heroism had begun to spread quietly among the citizens. Small whispers, private conversations, rumors carried through secure channels. The people admired him, not just for saving the princess, but for what he represented: courage, intelligence, and the will to act when it mattered. Symbols were powerful, and Kale had become one, even confined. One night, Kale received a message from Lyra through their code system. "The Queen is planning a ceremony tomorrow to honor the princess and display her gratitude to you publicly. But I think she intends to control the narrative to minimize your heroism." Kale considered this. It was predictable. The Queen wanted to maintain her authority. Humans, however, had a way of turning expectation on its head. "Then we will act," he replied. "Not with weapons, but with the truth. Human ingenuity is strongest when it surprises the world." The next day, the ceremony began. Dignitaries filled the hall, cameras recorded every moment, and the Queen prepared her speech. Kale, visible through the reinforced glass, remained calm, as though he were simply a participant in a routine event. But he had prepared. Using the device Lyra had given him, he triggered subtle signals. Lights pulsed in patterns that corresponded to messages in the palace's main network. Staff members, trained in Kale's code, began subtly redirecting camera feeds, showing moments of his bravery that the Queen could not erase. Citizens watching the broadcast saw Kale's heroism in real time, unfiltered. The Queen noticed immediately. Her carefully constructed narrative faltered. The people were seeing Kale as he truly was, a human willing to risk everything, clever enough to act under pressure, and brave enough to face death without hesitation. "Stop this," she demanded, but the palace staff hesitated, unsure whom to obey. Humans, she realized too late, were not predictable. Their loyalty was not to authority alone, but to courage, fairness, and ingenuity. Kale remained still in his chamber, watching the Queen's frustration grow. It was a subtle victory, but a victory nonetheless. He had turned the Queen's own systems against her without violence, using only his mind and human creativity. After the ceremony, the Queen summoned Kale to her private chambers. Her tone was icy, but there was a trace of begrudging respect. "You are clever," she said, "perhaps too clever for my liking. Do not think I have forgotten what you have done here. Kale bowed his head slightly. I act as any human would, Your Majesty, to survive, to protect, and to do what is right. You have made this palace unstable, she said. Be warned. I may allow you freedom in the future, but only when I am certain you cannot disrupt my authority again. Kale smiled faintly. Humans adapt. That is our strength. Authority cannot contain the human spirit forever. That night, Kale returned to his chamber, exhausted but undeterred. He and Lyra continued their secret communications, planning subtly for what the future might hold. Every minor victory, the signals, the subtle manipulations, the exposure of the truth, was a step toward eventual freedom. Humans were resilient. Humans were creative. And humans, when pushed, could change the course of events without firing a single shot. Kale reflected on what he had learned. Courage alone was not enough. Survival required intelligence, observation, and patience. The queen might have controlled his body, but she could not control his mind. And with the princess's help, his mind would become the spark that ignited change. He pressed his forehead against the glass, looking at the stars. Somewhere out there, humans were exploring, surviving, and thriving in impossible situations. He was one of them, confined now but ready to act. The chamber might hold his body, but it could not hold his spirit. And that spirit, Kale knew, would inspire others. For humans, Kale realized, endurance was not passive. It was active. It required constant observation, constant adaptation, and above all, courage. The queen had underestimated humanity, and that, Kale thought with satisfaction, was her first mistake. Tomorrow, he would continue his subtle campaign. He would continue to challenge the queen without breaking rules she did not understand. He would continue to teach the palace staff, the princess, and anyone who watched that human ingenuity could overcome even the most rigid control. Humans survived by thinking ahead. Humans thrived by refusing to be predictable. Humans triumphed when others assumed they could be contained. And Kale, despite the queen's efforts, was living proof of all of it. The chamber lights dimmed, but Kale's mind remained bright, plotting, observing, and preparing. Humanity was never weak. Humanity was never quiet. And one day soon, Kale knew, the queen would learn that even the most powerful ruler could not contain the human spirit forever. The morning sun cast a pale golden glow across the towering spires of the citadel. From his chamber, Kale watched the rays dance across the polished walls, reflecting faintly in the glass that separated him from the outside world. He had been planning this moment for weeks. Every observation, every small manipulation of the chamber, every coded message exchanged with Princess Lyra had led to this point. The queen still believed she controlled him. She had made mistakes, small but critical ones, underestimating human patience, intelligence, and creativity. Kale's body may have been confined, but his mind was free, and that was enough. He began the first step of his plan. Subtle, almost imperceptible adjustments to the chamber's systems using the tiny device Lyra had smuggled in. The lights flickered according to a precise pattern, signaling the palace staff trained in his code. Ventilation bots moved slightly off their programmed paths, creating tiny shadows and distractions. Maintenance drones, previously ignored, began to adjust their patrols in perfect alignment with Kale's mental map of the citadel. Lyra visited that afternoon. Her eyes shone with determination. "Are you ready?" she whispered through the reinforced glass. "The queen's guards are distracted. I've arranged access to the outer corridors. You can reach the shuttle bay." Kale nodded faintly, testing his strength. His body was still healing, but endurance had never been the only requirement. Humans survived by using brains first, strength second. "Everything depends on timing," he said. "Every second counts. If we miscalculate, it's over." That night, the citadel quieted. The queen's attention was focused elsewhere, reviewing reports of strange anomalies she could not explain. Every system Kale had manipulated worked in concert with the staff Lyra had discreetly instructed. The palace, vast and complex, had begun to bend under human ingenuity. Kale waited. He flexed his muscles, feeling the lingering pain in his chest, arms, and legs, remnants of the blast that had once threatened to end him. Every movement was measured, every breath calculated. He pressed a finger to the small device, initiating the final sequence. The chamber door, controlled remotely, opened just enough to allow him access to the maintenance tunnels. Sensors briefly glitched, a ripple caused by the precise timing of Kale's manipulations, and he slipped through. Darkness embraced him, cool and quiet, but not fearful. Humans were meant to endure, to move through shadows and obstacles with patience and wit. He navigated the tunnels with care, using maps memorized from months of observation. Every corner had a guard, every vent a sensor, every corridor a potential trap. But Kale had planned for it. Tiny reflective surfaces redirected cameras. Slightly misaligned ventilation flaps created blind spots. It was not brute force. It was calculation, ingenuity, the very essence of human survival. Finally, he reached a ladder leading to the surface corridors. Pausing, he observed a patrol approaching. Timing was critical. He dropped silently, letting the patrol pass just beyond a corner, then continued. Lyra, waiting ahead, guided him through whispered instructions via a hidden comm link. They reached the corridor leading to the shuttle bay. Kale's heart beat steadily, not from fear but from anticipation. Every human instinct was alert. They had one chance. One precise, calculated moment to act. The shuttle bay doors loomed ahead, sealed and guarded by advanced security systems. Kale studied the mechanisms briefly, recalling months of observation. He identified weak points, small gaps in the code, redundant systems that could be overridden, delays in sensor recalibration. He worked quickly, fingers flying across the device, sending signals that tricked the bay into opening just as a maintenance drone passed through. The doors slid open silently. Kale and Lyra stepped inside. The shuttle waited, sleek and quiet, its engines humming softly. Kale climbed into the pilot's seat. Lyra slid in beside him, holding his hand briefly. "You are incredible," she whispered. "Humans, they never give up, do they?" Kale smiled faintly. "We survive. That is what humans do. That, and we adapt when nothing seems possible." He powered up the shuttle. Sensors blinked to life, but Kale had already overridden the main security network. The engines purred, responding precisely to his commands. They would not be stopped, not by brute force, not by authority, not by expectation. The Queen's voice came through the intercom suddenly, sharp and demanding. "Kale, stop immediately. Return at once or you will be destroyed." Kale ignored her. Humans rarely waited for permission. Instead, they acted when the moment demanded. The shuttle lifted from the bay, moving through the orbital corridors with careful precision. Automated defenses attempted to engage, but Kale's subtle manipulations ensured each system failed to recognize them as threats until it was too late. As they approached the outer doors of the Citadel, Kale's mind focused on one goal: safety for the princess, and proving that human courage and intelligence could overcome even the strictest control. They emerged into open space. The stars stretched infinitely ahead and the Citadel shrank behind them. Lyra leaned back, relief washing over her. "You did it," she whispered. We," Kale smiled, still vigilant. "It is never over until it is over. Humans do not triumph by luck. We triumph by thought, preparation, and courage." They entered the shuttle's jump drive, plotting a course to a hidden human settlement on a nearby moon. As the stars blurred into streaks, Kale reflected on what had happened. The Queen had underestimated them. She had controlled his body but not his mind. She had attempted to suppress courage, but courage could not be contained. It spread, inspiring others, igniting hope. In the days following their escape, Kale and Lyra coordinated with allies in the palace. carefully guiding those sympathetic to human ideals. The queen remained powerful, but cracks had formed. People whispered about Kale's ingenuity, about how a single human had changed the course of events without a single act of violence. On the moon's settlement, Kale finally allowed himself to rest. He gazed at the twin suns rising over the rocky horizon, the light reflecting in Lyra's eyes. "We did it," she said softly. Kale shook his head slightly. "No, we only began. Humans always begin with what seems impossible. Then we endure, adapt, and achieve. That is why we survive. That is why we are strong." Lyra smiled, understanding. The human spirit, Kale realized, was not measured by weapons, authority, or control. It was measured by courage, ingenuity, and the willingness to act when it mattered most. He had risked everything for her, and for that, he had demonstrated the best of humanity. Word of their escape spread quietly but rapidly. Citizens and allies recognized the genius of Kale's actions. No battles, no destruction, only cleverness, courage, and human willpower. The queen could control systems and walls, but she could not control what humans represented: hope, resilience, and intelligence. Kale's actions inspired others across the kingdom. Humans and sympathetic aliens began to adopt his methods, small acts of courage and ingenuity that challenged oppressive authority without violence. It was subtle but unstoppable. The princess turned to Kale one evening, holding his hand. "You saved me," she said. "Not just my life, but something more. You showed me what humans are truly capable of." Kale smiled, though exhaustion weighed heavily on him. "Humans survive," he said simply. "We endure, we adapt, and when the moment comes, we act. That is all, that is enough." The moon's twin suns set behind them, casting long shadows across the settlement. Kale and Lyra stood side by side, gazing at the horizon. The queen's citadel lay far behind, a symbol of authority that could no longer contain courage. For Kale, the journey was not only about survival or freedom. It was about proving that humans, even when constrained, could think, act, and triumph. It was about demonstrating that bravery, intelligence, and ingenuity were the true weapons of humanity. And so, in the quiet of the moon settlement, Kale rested, knowing that humans had endured the impossible once more, and that the story of courage he had written would inspire generations to come. Humanity had triumphed, not with violence, not with brute force, but with courage, cleverness, and the indomitable human spirit. Kale had saved the princess with his own body, and now he was free, not only in body but in mind. And the queen, despite her power, would never be able to undo what humans could achieve when they refused to yield. The stars shone brightly overhead, infinite and unyielding. Humans, Kale knew, would always rise to meet the impossible, and this was only the beginning.